Here we go. All right. This is a interview with the inimitable Jane Yolen, who is one of the stars of the Reinvented Heart. It's always weird pointing to something in the background. But the book that has just come out in electronic form and will come out soon in print form. Jane does not just have poems in The Reinvented Heart, but also in The Reinvented Detective, which is our follow-up next year. And in both cases, we've used Jane's poems to kind of organize the book. For this one, it's Hearts, starting out with her poem, They, a Grammar Lesson, then Hands with the poem, There is a Hand, and then Minds with Mars Conquest. So I wanted to start by saying, hello, Jane. It is lovely to see you. And why did you send poems instead of short stories to this anthology?
Well, first of all, I am writing a hell of a lot more poems than I am short stories. I have had a wasteland of short stories, I would say, for the last 6 to 8 years. I had written so many short stories. I was written out. Interestingly enough, I have started writing a bunch of short stories for a collection of my own on Alice in Wonderland called Old Mimsy, which hasn't sold yet. But it's poetry that fascinates me, partially maybe because at 83 I have a smaller attention span, or partially because I started writing poetry when I was in first grade and have not stopped ever since. And to me, it is my sweet spot. My other sweet spot is children's picture books because they are like poems.
That's it.
So, and I also write a poem a day to send out
Ooh.
over 1,000 subscribers. If I only charged the money for it, I'd be very rich at this point, but I just send them out because I love to send out my poems to people who want to read them. So that's why I got to send out those poems to you. Now, I wrote them specifically for the book that you said, Jane, can you write something for the book? And I said, how about a poem? And then I remembered that there was sort of like a space. And then you said, poems would be nice. So I sent out a poem, and 3, in fact. But it wasn't until I saw the first galleys of the book did I realize that you had organized the book around my poems, which I thought, I don't think that's ever happened before.
Oh.
Well, that was exciting.
We did that with the Reinvented Detective too. I think we asked you specifically for kind of poems. Jen was like, ask her for these things.
Yeah, so that's, if you ask me, I can write a poem about anything.
Well, that's one of my questions, is whether kind of poems, if it's easier to write them if you've got some strictures in place, or whether you just sort of sit down and go, poem time.
Well, because I have to have a poem every day.
Yeah.
Poem time, but mostly it's, oh, I just read this interesting article. I just had this interesting thing happen to me. I read something that I stole a line from. I always, if it's a good stolen line, I put it up at the top of the poem. But today, for example, I read an article on the finding of the what's his name's boat that crashed.
Oh, the Shackleton's boat.
They found it, and I wrote the poem about that because it was fascinating, and I had to write it. So I keep an eye on stuff, and sometimes someone will send me a letter, or I'm writing a book of something else and it feeds into it. Or, I think the whole thing about writing is paying attention. As writers, you have to pay attention to the world around you, to the world, the larger world, to the inner world. But if you're not paying attention, that poem, that story, that song, that novel will disappear.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
You know,
yeah.
it's a little bit like paying attention means you're paying attention to the muse. And if the muse doesn't find you at your desk, she goes somewhere else. There's
Absolutely.
people out there at their desks waiting for the muse. So I want to
Yeah,
be.
I love that because there is a technique that Damon Knight talks about in a writing book where he says if you're stuck, go outside and look at things until you notice something that you've never noticed before, which I think is just, it is a great piece of advice.
I tell my writing students, we go outside somewhere in the time that we're having a writing, maybe it's a weekend, you know, or a week, institute kind of thing. We go outside and I say, we're going to walk around for an hour. And if you don't come back with 10 ideas, hard. You know, you're not working hard enough. I said, now, not all those ideas, when you spread them out in front of yourself, are viable. You have to triage. These look pretty good. I think I can make something out of this idea. These need a lot of, you know, artificial respiration, and these are dead on arrival.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting thing is, sometimes a dead on arrival is a revenant in disguise, and they
Ooh.
rise up in the middle of the night and say, write me.
Oh, I love that.
You have to do it. So I have, on a regular basis, go back to all my old starts of things, or old poems. And I can then take a poem and make it into a short story or a picture book. I can make a poem into a collection, because sometimes I need time and a change in what's going on in my life or the world's life to make that become the inspiration for the next thing to write.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Well, so that's one way to kind of nurture the creative juices by paying attention to the universe. And are there other things that you are doing to make yourself creatively juicy in these somewhat dry times, just to sort of beat that metaphor to
I
death?
think that because I have always, everybody laughs at me because I know everybody, and I used to say it too, you know, why is writing such fun? Because you can do it every day in your jammies. I don't jammies to write, because then I find if I'm in my jammies, I am in distract mode. Oh, I haven't eaten yet. I haven't gotten dressed yet. I haven't done this yet. I get up in the morning, I get dressed as if I were going to work, and I sit down and I work. So for me, writing is both joy, interest, but it's work as well. It's my work. And I have to treat it as a partial business, because for me, it is a partial business. I have no other job.
Right.
My life died without leaving a pension. So I am, you know, SOL.
Yeah.
And so I need to find out who's buying what. I need to know who the new editors are. I need to know who the new assistant editors are. I need to check what they have published recently. It's all part of my dailiness. And I try to send out at least one poem or one story, or one book every day to
Wow. Yeah.
someone. Now, if you know that I have 400 books out, you know that
Yeah.
I'm successful at that. And if you only send out one book a year, your chances of getting published have diminished by an enormous amount. You may need to send it to 100 people or to 365 people before someone takes it. You have to have the guts to do that. It's not a business for sissies.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. So when you sit down to work, do you sit down and start writing immediately, or do you piddle around with email first? At what point does email enter the equation? All right.
Email. I send out my poem. If I haven't written it, I have to sit down and figure out something to write. They send that out. I check my email because somebody might have bought a book.
There you go.
Or somebody might have returned one, and then it has to go out right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I won't say that I start by writing. I start by gearing up.
Okay.
And then once I'm going, I mean, sometimes someone has to remind me that it's lunchtime.
Yeah.
Because if it's going well, then it's going.
It's such a delight, isn't it?
The hell with meals, you know, just wait a minute. I don't want, no, I don't want to go out for a walk yet. No, I don't. I'm busy. And Peter is a love. He's also a poet.
Lovely. Nice.
You know, published two nonfiction books, and he and I have a book of poems just coming out together. And you know, it's interesting to see, to live with someone who is a writer, but who mostly published in his desk drawer. And
yeah.
You're going to hang out with me, you're going to get published outside your desk drawer.
I love that.
He's had at least a poem. He's had a poem in Asimov's First Time Out. Is a constant contributor to a literary magazine now called Meet for Tea, which is always either the first or the second best literary magazine in Massachusetts.
Nice.
We've written and are, I think, about to sell 2 picture books together. And he had never thought about writing a picture book, even though he was a teacher for all of his life. And I'm always going, come on, you can do it. You can. Sending out his poems on his own.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It sounds like a delightful partnership. So now, and you're going off to Scotland. So
lass.
I was wondering is there a particular setting that you find enables writing more than another?
Well, I've had this house in St. Andrews, Scotland for 30 years. And my late husband was an honorary professor at St. Andrews University, a pet professor at the University of Massachusetts. And so we went for a sabbatical there, fell in love with the house we were renting. And luckily they wanted not to sell it completely. Would we buy a half share?
Oh.
I said, we only want it in the summer.
Yeah.
And they said, fine, you can have it in the summer. So 7 years, we had it in the summer. Now David died 15 years ago. And so I've been a widow for some time. And one of the things that kept me going was knowing that I could go 4 months a year, 5 months a year to Scotland, where I have some wonderful friends, a number of writer friends. Lisa Tuttle is there. Yeah. And Elizabeth Falk and other writers that I know, and it's wonderful.
Nice.
But the 3 years, this past 3 years, I haven't been able to go. And so Peter and I are going. He's bicycled all over Scotland, but he has never been to St. Andrews, and he's never seen my house there. And it's part of an arts and crafts mansion, not the whole mansion, just part of it. And I've been wanting to show it to him for 3 years now.
Oh, that's so lovely. And you finally get to sort of unveil it and show all the pieces.
I hope it isn't, in the 3 years that I've been gone, I hope it isn't fallen totally apart. But,
I'm sure it's lovely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm looking at my questions to see if there's anything that I wanted to make sure that we covered. Oh, well, you said you are working on stories based on Alice in Wonderland. And I was curious, is there something about, what is it about Alice that made you decide to go with
This is
her?
that she's quite a heroine of mine. And it was the first real book that my parents gave me. I must have
Right.
been 3 or 4 at the time, but I was reading by 4. And I was reading well by 4. And they gave me the 2 books in a boxed edition, a beautiful boxed edition, with the old pictures in it as well. And I read it and read it and read it. And she became, in some ways, and it's funny, my 2 culture heroes, heroines, my 2 female culture heroes. On the one end are Alice in Wonderland, and the other end, Baba Yaga. Age, but and both of them had incredible nosiness, always in other people's businesses. Nothing seemed to faze either one of them. I have gone back, and over the years, I had written a number of Alice in Wonderland stories and poems, but had never thought to put them together.
Nice.
And day, about 4 or 5 months ago, I was sitting around, and the phrase "Old Mimsy," because I recited,
Of course.
in the slithy toves dig iron gimble in the wabe, "Old Mimsy were the borogroves and the mome raths outgrabe." And I do, that's my
Nice.
get me at a party and I will do the whole thing for you.
Excellent.
But "Old Mimsy" kept repeating in my brain. And I thought, what if I did a collection of the short stories that I have and the poems and call it "Old Mimsy"? And I'll write a story called "Old Mimsy." I don't know what it is yet. And I sent it to one publisher. And though they loved it, they said it was not long enough because there were 6 or 7 stories in it. And poems. I thought, oh God, I haven't written a short story in a while. I don't know if I can write, except for the Old Mimsy Story, which was already in my head. I don't know. And the Old Mimsy Story, I was dreaming every night of what it was going to be. It was going to be a young girl, a young princess, and her father, the king, who has already lost 3 sons fighting the Jabberwocky. And she wakes up in the morning and she says, "Oh, father, it's all Mimsy out there." And they both know what that means. The Jabberwock is on with eyes of flame, is going to come whiffling through the tulgey wood, burbling as it comes. And she's going to say, "I will do it, father." And he said, "I've lost 3 boys. I don't want to lose my daughter." She says, I am the daughter of a king. I have to do my duty." And she goes and dresses in her dead brother's clothing. So she'll look like a boy, maybe surprise the Jabberwocky. Takes the Vorpal's sword in hand and goes through the tulgey wood. And I won't tell you how it ends.
It's awesome. But a Maxim foe is involved, I'm sure. Awesome.
Yes. But then I realized when it came back from the editor that it needed more stories. And I went through Alice in Wonderland again. And so I wrote a Dormouse story, and I wrote a, what else did I do? A story about the hook, the creature with the caterpillar with the hookah.
Oh yeah.
So I went through and I gave a number of stories to the other creatures there, who were, and then there are a number of stories of Alice at various ages falling down the rabbit hole until she fell her last time there.
Oh, I love that.
I'll send it back to him. If he decides to do it, I will be delighted. I won't mention who it is because I don't want to shame him if it doesn't. but I'm hoping he takes it this time.
I hope he does too, because I would like to read it. It sounds awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you go pack for your trip to Scotland, which is awesome. Thank you so much for taking time. Thank you for sending amazing poems. Oh, you've got them written out. Will you read one?
I can read all three because they're very short.
I would love that. That would be amazing.
The first one is called Grammar Lesson. We are two, though one, have been since we met. First a threat, then lover, then a united front against the rest. This was no test, except love is always thus, not you, not me, us. And the second one is called There Is a Hand, which is sort of an odd poem. As I reread it to myself today, I said, gosh, that's a really odd poem. There is a hand on my breast, but at last, not just my own. It is cold, but iron is always cold. The fingers are well-shaped, bolts mostly hidden. There is a breast upon my breast. It is hard, but iron is hard. The nipples stand at attention, pressing into my flesh, surprisingly erotic, exotic. There is a flush of blood, of bile, of lust, the dust of my past. There is a tongue in my mouth. It is cold, well-shaped, finely formed. But iron is always finely formed, and it is mine.
That is
a creepy poem, isn't it? As she turns slowly in love and into iron.
So cool.
And the last one is called Mars Conquest. Underground we went. Oh, let me wait until Peter picks up the phone.
Okay, no worries.
Peter, pick up the phone. Okay. Mars Conquest. Underground we went, the only way to live in that world. You there before us, so rich in story, we were taken by it, falling in love with the telling, the tellers. So swift we became yours, before we knew the whole tale, before we knew what you were, before we knew what we would become, the receptacle of your histories, your mysteries, your stories, your poems. Mr. Putin, that's how you take over people.
So awesome.
Tell them your stories,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, absolutely. All right. I don't think we could top that, can we? That was pretty awesome.
Yes. I have to thank you for all the times you've sent me chocolate. To Scotland, no more chocolate.
Well, you know, chocolate's necessary part of existence, I think.
Oh, very good chocolate in Scotland. They even have chocolate medals.
Ooh.
They're covered with a gold leaf. And once a year in Scotland, when I used to go every year, we had a fantasy writers luncheon at my house.
Oh, nice.
And I got people these chocolate medals. I'd say, treat for you, and I'd bring out the chocolate medals.
Oh, that's fabulous. All right, I'm gonna wind things down. I will say to people again, go get the Reinvented Heart and see how we, it is, I think, my favorite of the anthologies I've edited so far. I think it's just dynamite and I'm super pleased by it. So I'm going to stop recording here.